Yo, what's up? It's Remy. So this is part one of the video tutorial series where I walk you through the guide to no-code marketplaces. So this is meant to be a video kind of complement to the guide. So this is assuming you've downloaded the guide. It's at guides.everythingmarketplaces.com. And this is going to be part one where I walk you through the entire guide in a multi-part video series. So we're just going to jump right into the guide. So as you can see right here, this first kind of part that I'm going to walk you through is going to be basically the 1 through 3 of the guide to no-code marketplaces. So before you even get started with actually building your marketplace, it definitely makes sense to think about your marketplace as a business, because once again, marketplaces are businesses. So definitely ask yourself some of these key questions. So the first is going to be, what problem are you solving? So what problem exists that you're solving with your marketplace? The second is going to be, who are you solving it for? So, who has this problem existing in the market, in the real world, that your marketplace is going to help solve the problem for? And the third is going to be, what are your skills, resources, and timeline for building, launching, and running your online marketplaces? So that's quite the question. But basically, we'll kind of break that down. So what are your skills? So how technical are you? Or if you have a team, do you have technical kind of resources available to you? Same thing with budget, right? So what's your budget for kind of building this? And then the next is going to be the timeline. So what's your kind of timeline with, basically launching your business, but not only that, but operating it. So do you have like a 6 month kind of runway that you've given yourself? Or is it like a year, or is it just like time sensitive and, you need to get it out ASAP? So those are definitely questions that you should keep in mind that play a factor, when you're initially building and launching your online marketplace. So, and for the matter of fact, pretty much any online business. So the fourth is going to be, how are you uniquely positioned to solve this yourself and through creating an online marketplace? So do you have some kind of unique insight into this problem? That's a great question that I think, a lot of founders can ask themselves. So for instance, in studio time, is this something that I saw firsthand and have industry experience in? That would just be something to kind of ask yourself when you're thinking through this problem, and just think like, how are you uniquely positioned to be the right person to solve that problem? Are you a domain expert? So the fifth is going to be, as a marketplace, how are you going to add value to both supply and demand? And then the second kind of part to that is, what's your desired relationship with each side as a marketplace? So we'll use studio time, for instance, again. So for instance, how are we going to add value to the supply side? So we're going to help them be able to bring their services online and generate revenue. On the demand side, it's simply going to be, we allow them to book a studio. It's going to be easier, faster, and probably cheaper than the other alternatives that exist, not just marketplaces, but all the other solutions that they have available to them. And the second part to that question is, so what is your desired relationship with them as a marketplace? So for instance, if we're just a listing directory and we didn't actually kind of connect them with demand, and we didn't own the transaction layer, then that would be a different relationship, and it wouldn't be as deeper as if we own the entire kind of process from discovery to booking with the actual kind of payment. That would be a deeper relationship with both the supply and demand. So that's a great question to ask yourself in the initial stages of building and launching an online marketplace. So the next is going to be, how are you going to monetize this? So there's various ways you can monetize a marketplace. As kind of mentioned above with the listing directory, you could have listing fees. Say for instance, in studio time, we actually charge a subscription. So that is kind of like a listing fee for the studios to have a listing. Booking commission fees. And then of course from there, it definitely makes sense to also think about, who are you charging, right? Are you charging supply? Are you charging the demand? Are you charging them both? And then, how much are you charging them? So a way to kind of think about this is that you can also research first off, your competition. So are there any other existing marketplaces, and what do they charge, and who are they charging? And then also outside of marketplaces, but just other places that, maybe these businesses can generate bookings, or these other kind of users can book, say, for instance, in this case, music studios, what is that kind of monetization like? And then the next question after that is to think about, how are we going to differentiate as a marketplace and ensure there isn't a platform overlap with other marketplaces. So this is a really important question to think about, as a marketplace, say for instance in studio time, how are we going to differentiate and how are we going to be defensible too as a marketplace, and also ensure that there's no overlap. So it's kind of referred to as multi-tenanting when, say for instance, your supply is on multiple marketplaces. And a great example of this is Lyft and Uber. So some drivers, the supply side, multi-tenant, so they're on both Lyft and Uber. And even on the demand side, there is there's the kind of multi-tenanting issue. Whereas, some people use Lyft and Uber, and there's various factors on, why they would choose to use different ones and kind of switch between. But the ideal is to not have that kind of issue with multi-tenanting and be defensible as a marketplace, which means there's kind of like less overlap with other marketplaces. So those are some initial questions just to think through, even before you get started, even signing up for some of these other tools, just to think through your marketplace idea, some of the fundamentals as an actual business. So from there, we're going to jump right into basically talking about marketplace business models. So what are the different business models for marketplaces? And there's more, but these are the most common and just the ones that I wanted to identify in this use case for the guide. So the first is going to be peer-to-peer marketplaces. So what that means is simply marketplaces that connect individuals. So that's going to be consumers and consumer demand directly to facilitate bookings, transactions, or some other sort of value exchange through their platform. So of course, some of the best examples of this are going to be Airbnb, which is, homeowners connecting directly with others looking to stay in their homes. So those are two kind of consumers or individuals. Also, Studio Time has a similar kind of component as a peer-to-peer marketplace. So some people have home studios, for instance, and they're renting them out to other individuals. Next example of that is going to be business-to-consumer marketplaces or B2C marketplaces. So these are marketplaces that connect businesses to consumers directly through their platform. So an example of this could also be, we'll use another example. So for instance, Turo could have a peer-to-peer component. So they have individual car owners connecting with other consumers looking to book a car. They also have a business-to-consumer kind of component to it, where they do allow businesses to list their fleet of cars, or individuals that have basically graduated from, say, one car on peer-to-peer and built a business. So they do operate as a business and then offer their supply to consumers directly through the platform. So you can kind of have like a mix, but primarily they tend to stick to a kind of core business model for marketplace. Then the next, which is a little bit more popular right now, is going to be the business to business or B2B marketplaces. So these are marketplaces that connect businesses to other businesses for some sort of bookings, transactions, or some sort of other kind of value exchange through their platform. And these are increasingly popular right now. And those individuals that have deep domain expertise and say a specific kind of industry are definitely well equipped to start these kind of business to business marketplaces, because they take that deep industry insight knowledge and kind of like unique understanding in order to start these B2B marketplaces. The next is going to be managed marketplaces. So these are also popular. They basically connect, of course, like two sides, so supply and demand through their platform. And a key difference here is that sometimes they assume ownership of the supply side. They also assume more liability, and sometimes, for instance, of a product or goods marketplace. They also assume liability through inventory sometimes, holding cost, and just other liabilities. So a good example of this is going to be the RealReal, which is like a luxury kind of consignment, and sometimes they outright buy their supply from individuals and then list it on their marketplace to consumers. Another one's going to be GoDap. So they do assume some liability in that they actually require their sellers to ship their whatever they're selling to them, and they assume basically part of the value prop is the authentication. And then once it's authenticated, it ships to GOAT, then they send it out to the end buyer. So they do kind of have that as like a managed kind of model where they do offer verification as a value add of their marketplace. But of course, that comes with some sense of liability. So those are the main marketplace business models. And then we're going to go down to then the marketplace types. So we kind of ran through just thinking through some of the key considerations before even, jumping into your marketplace, kind of building it. Ran through some of the common marketplace, business models. And now we're going to jump into the different types. So we're going to be a little bit more specific. So the first is going to be spaces marketplaces. So this is, as it's fairly straightforward. Basically, marketplaces that connect, physical spaces with others, for renting. A great example, once again, is going to be Airbnb or Studio Time. The next is going to be service marketplaces, and these are increasingly popular right now. So these are marketplaces that connect, two sides for exchange of, online or offline services. The next is going to be products or goods marketplaces. It's these connect, two sides for either, sales or rentals of products or goods through their marketplace. Some of the examples I kind of mentioned above, say for instance, like Goat and the Real, they're going to be products or goods marketplaces. So now we've kind of skimmed through that because it should be fairly straightforward. This is where it gets a little bit more specific, so we can even further refine. Okay, now that you know a little bit more about your marketplace business, kind of gone through some initial kind of key considerations, understood the kind of popular business models and types, now it makes sense to kind of think about, okay, now that you know that and you've honed in on a little more, what are some of the kind of core marketplace functionality and features that you're going to need for your marketplace? So for spaces marketplaces, it's going to be fairly straightforward. Typically, it's going to be user accounts, listing creation and management. So this is fairly straightforward. Basic availability and scheduling management is very typical. So for instance, we'll just kind of run through a use case on this, but in Studio Time, user studio sign up, have a user account, able to create a listing, multiple listings, manage it, able to basically indicate some sense of availability on the studio and manage that, which of course makes booking requests easier. Typically, they have location-based search and some kind of discovery through the marketplace. That's typically kind of map-based for spaces since it is dependent on location. User-to-user messaging through the platform. So that's pretty key with peer-to-peer marketplaces. So users able to freely message each other. And then also to transact directly through the marketplace. That's going to be like a booking request and transaction process directly through the marketplace. Also from there, it's going to be the booking management and booking reviews. So that's fairly straightforward, and I think everyone's probably used like an Airbnb, HipCamp Turo, or some of the popular peer-to-peer marketplaces, and definitely, has some experience using this and this functionality. So the next is going to be for services and offline, whether that's online or offline for the delivery of those services marketplaces. So this is going to be a little bit, there's going to be some specific kind of core marketplace functionality that's dependent on for this specific type. We kind of mentioned the user accounts, listing creation. So the availability and scheduling management is going to be a little bit different here based off whether it's like online or offline services. It's still going to probably utilize the same kind of core functionality, but the user interface and how that specifically applies to the availability of the supply and their services is definitely going to look a little bit different for this. So for instance, on the calendar for, if you're going to say for Studio Time for indicating availability of the studio is going to look a little bit different for the space versus if they're going to offer a service and deliver that online or offline. Location-based search right here. So location-based search is going to be something if it is an offline service. Now, if it's online, of course, that's probably not going to be I don't think that's going to be that relevant just because if it's not location dependent and it's virtual and so online, then your search kind of might be different. It might be like a keyword based search or whatnot. User to user messaging, if this is peer to peer, once again, booking request and transaction process. Now through the booking request and transaction process, some kind of key differentiations here is that if it is an online delivery, there isn't an offline experience. It's completely online. So that actual kind of transaction process and even the fulfillment of that is going to be completely online. So typically these marketplaces have a little bit more kind of robust kind of functionality, whether that comes to like the tracking of the services as far as indicating it as, in progress, the communication, delivery. and then even kind of completion and the management and the reviews. Typically, if it is completely online, then of course, there isn't an offline component, and they're going to typically have a little bit more kind of functionality through that online dashboard for the supply side, and also on the buyer side or the demand. So we're going to kind of jump down into now we're in the products and good marketplaces. So this is once again fairly straightforward. User accounts, listing creation. So sometimes it is going to be availability and whatnot. Location-based search might be important, or it might not. So these are kind of like, these are fairly, definitely, I would say there's a lot of similarities between them. Whether it's spaces, services, or, goods marketplaces, because once again, I try to create like a guide, just like a basic kind of framework for this, but it is definitely going to be, there's a lot of different variables. So for instance, if it's physical goods, then location-based search is going to come in, because maybe, maybe these items aren't going to be shippable, or it's pickup. So then once again, location-based search would be relevant. If these are items that are shipped and you don't offer offline kind of delivery, then of course location-based search is not going to be that relevant, and it would just be keyword-based. Through these, typically they might have a little bit different transaction process. So say for instance, when you initiate a booking, or sorry, either a rental, if it's for rentals, or a transaction for purchase, typically there is going to be some kind of a little bit like more delivery and kind of tracking of that, since it is physical goods. Versus like a services or a rental for spaces for a specific kind of period of use. So say for instance, if you've ever used like GoDapp, or if you've ever used like Goat or even eBay, then you're quite familiar with that and the tracking and how that kind of ties into the actual transaction process. And then for that, able to then notify the marketplace as far as that transaction is completed, and the reviews from there. So it's fairly straightforward from there. So we're going to stop right here on this part. But basically, I wanted to run through the guide to no-code marketplaces. And once again, this is going to be a multi-part kind of unedited screen share series. But I want to start with first, thinking through your marketplace as a business. So, not just like it uniquely as an online marketplace. What are the fundamental kind of key considerations that you should think about before even starting your online marketplace? Then kind of going down, thinking about the different marketplace business models, and then from there jumping into the main marketplace types, and then some of the core functionality that apply to each of those marketplace types. So this is once again the first part, and you can check out the next videos that I'll post shortly that runs through the rest of the guide. And also you can download the guide because these videos are assuming that you've downloaded the guide at guides.everythingmarketplaces.com. But if you haven't, you can check it out there, download it for free, just simply by entering your email, and then you can jump right into these videos. Thanks.